My parents used me and paid for my sister's wedding with my savings. I found out about it on Facebook. Thanks to the sponsor who stayed home. My mother wrote, tagging me. I replied, tomorrow you're in for a big surprise. That night I made decision. 14 hours later, my mother called me in a panic 17 times. My sister's fiancé was desperately knocking on my door. My dad was begging me to listen to them. When I first saw the post, I didn't even feel shocked. I felt heat rising in my chest. A kind of boiling fury that didn't come all at once but spread through me slowly, like smoke filling a room. My mom posted a photo from the wedding. My sister in her dress, beaming like a Disney bride. My dad and mom on either side of her. Dozens of people behind them, clapping. A venue that definitely wasn't cheap. It hit me in the gut. I wasn't even invited to the wedding. I hadn't heard a single thing about it in weeks. They'd gone radio silent ever since my sister and her fiancé got into a fight about money at a barbecue I wasn't supposed to hear about. I just figured it got postponed or downsized. But now they were publicly thanking me. For what? I clicked through the photos. The food. The band. The giant cake. None of this looked like something they could afford right now. Not unless they got help. Or used money that wasn't theirs. That's when I started to put it together. The $8,500 I'd left with my parents for safekeeping, it had been sitting in their account for months. I didn't want to keep it in my apartment because the neighborhood wasn't great, and I wasn't banking online much back then. It was supposed to be for a car. My car was on its last legs. I'd been working nonstop to save that money. And now I was looking at a wedding I didn't attend, didn't know was happening, and was apparently the sponsor of. Still, a part of me hoped I was wrong. That maybe this was just a joke. Maybe it was their way of thanking me for something else. Maybe it wasn't my money. I called my dad. Told him I needed to ask something. Just wanted to know if the money was still where I left it. He didn't even sound guilty. Said they used it. That the wedding came up fast, things were tight, and they needed help. That it was. Just sitting there anyway. That I wasn't using it. Like that justified everything. He said it like it was no big deal. Like it wasn't theft. Like it wasn't betrayal. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just hung up. That was the moment everything snapped into place. The posts, the smiles, the lack of an invitation, it all made sense. They hadn't wanted me there because I wasn't a guest. I was an ATM. That night I called a lawyer. Someone I knew from college. Told him everything. The money was mine, left in trust. No permission given. No loan. Just pure entitlement from a family that clearly didn't think I'd do anything about it. By the next morning, the lawsuit was already moving. At 9:03 a.m., I sent one voice message to my mom. Tomorrow, you're in for a big surprise. She must have listened to it right away because the panic set in fast. By noon, she had called me 17 times. My dad texted me twice and then left a voicemail saying this was all a misunderstanding. My sister's fiancé showed up at my door like it was life or death. I didn't open it. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about respect. And they were about to learn what happens when you treat someone like they're expendable. The silence that followed my message was short-lived. At exactly 6:41 a.m., my phone lit up with the first call. Dad. Then again 2 minutes later. Then a text. Call me back. We need to talk before this gets out of hand. By 7:15, I'd received 9 missed calls. 3 from Mom, 2 from my sister, 4 from my dad. I didn't answer any of them. I just kept refreshing the tracking updates from my lawyer. The paperwork was out. Certified delivery. Not just a letter. A full demand for repayment, with interest and legal fees included. The lawyer made sure to put it plainly, theft of entrusted funds, held without authorization. At 8:03, my dad sent a message. Not to apologize. Not to make things right. But this. You need to calm down. It wasn't just us. Ryan said it was fine. Talk to your future son-in-law. I just stared at it for a second. Ryan. My sister's fiancé. I hadn't even considered him. He barely spoke to me outside of family stuff, and we were never close. I didn't even think he'd know about the money. But now, apparently, this whole thing was his fault. My dad had always been good at shifting blame, but this was the first time he'd thrown someone outside the bloodline under the bus. He was scared. I could tell. This wasn't just about money anymore. If they'd involved someone else, even tangentially, the legal situation just got worse. At 9:26 a.m., my sister tried calling. I let it ring out. Then came the messages from her. A flood of them. First saying they were sorry I felt blindsided. Then that they didn't think I'd react this way. Then that I was making too big a deal out of something they'd already used. Already used. She actually wrote that. Like my savings were some expired coupon. I didn't answer. But I knew it wasn't over. Around 5:45 p.m., I heard loud knocking at my apartment door. Not aggressive. Just persistent. Someone wasn't leaving without a conversation. I looked through the peephole. Ryan. He was alone. No suit, no tie like the wedding photos. Just jeans, a t-shirt, and this expression that tried to look neutral but didn't pull it off. I opened the door, not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed to hear whatever garbage excuse he'd bring with him. He stepped inside without asking and immediately started talking. Said he didn't know the money was mine. That he thought my parents had helped out with wedding costs, and that was that. That he only found out it was mine the day after the wedding when he saw my mom's Facebook post and asked about the caption. I didn't say anything. Then he said something that made it all worse. Your dad told us not to invite you. Said you'd just make things complicated. That you'd never really been involved anyway, and that it was better if you weren't there. He said it like he was offering me closure. Like that would make me feel better. All it did was confirm everything I'd suspected. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd cut me out on purpose. I asked him one question. Did he ever stop and ask whose money it was? He looked down and said no. I told him to leave. He tried to justify it again, talking about how stressful weddings were, how everyone was under pressure, how it was all just a misunderstanding. I opened the door and waited until he walked out. By 7 the next morning, the letter had been received. That same day, my dad called again. This time, I picked up. He didn't yell. Didn't apologize either. Just sounded tired. Said, "You're really going through with this?" I said yes. Absolutely. Then he said something that made everything click. "This is on him, Michael. Ryan said he could cover the difference. We were just trying to help your sister. If you want the money, talk to him." He was passing the buck again, pretending none of it was his doing. But I'd already talked to Ryan. And Ryan had made it clear. He was told I wouldn't care. They were all in on it. Maybe not equally, but no one stopped it. That night, I got a voicemail from my sister. She was crying. Said the lawsuit was tearing the family apart. Said Dad had promised her it would be handled quietly. That he told her I didn't need to know. And then she said something I'll never forget. "I didn't invite you because I didn't want to hear you say no. I thought if you weren't there, it'd be easier." Easier. They used my money. Left me out. Lied. And it was easier that way. That's when I knew I wasn't just suing for the money. I was suing to remind them that I wasn't disposable. The next morning, someone buzzed my apartment at 6:57 a.m. I didn't move. They buzzed again. Then 3 more times. I finally checked the camera feed, expecting Ryan again. Nope. This time, it was all 3 of them. My dad. My sister. Ryan. All standing outside the front entrance like a disheveled tour group. My sister was pacing. Dad had his arms crossed. Ryan was talking fast, probably trying to convince them this was a mistake. I didn't buzz them in. At 7:03 my phone rang. It was my mom. I didn't answer. At 7:05 my dad texted. "We're downstairs. Open the door. We're not leaving until we talk." I let them wait 20 minutes before I went down. They were still there when I opened the building door. My sister looked up like she was about to fall apart. Ryan avoided eye contact. My dad went straight into his speech. Said this had gotten out of control. That we were family. That lawsuits were for strangers, not blood. That he was trying to fix it. I asked him one question. Just one. "Did you tell them it was okay to use my money?" He said no. Then yes. Then kind of. Then blamed Ryan. Said Ryan was supposed to pay part of the wedding but came up short, and that the whole thing would have collapsed if they didn't step in. That he assumed I'd understand. That it was just bad timing. Then Ryan jumped in, saying my dad told him I wasn't involved in family stuff, that I wouldn't mind helping, and that it was already decided by the time he found out whose money it really was. I turned to my sister. She barely looked at me. I asked her, point blank, if she knew it was my money. She nodded. I didn't know what to do. I thought Dad was handling it. He said we'd pay you back quietly. Quietly. Like I was a problem to be managed. Not a brother. Not a guest. Just the piggy bank. Then Dad said something that sealed it. This is why we didn't want you involved in the wedding. You always overreact. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because I realized in that moment, he really believed they were the victims here. That I was the one being irrational for wanting my stolen money back. That it was somehow a betrayal that I wouldn't let them sweep it under the rug. I looked at Ryan. You're marrying into this, I said. You should know what you're signing up for. He didn't say a word. They started raising their voices. Begging. Threatening. Pleading. My sister said they couldn't pay me back right now. That they'd already used the honeymoon fund for furniture. That if I went through with the lawsuit, she might lose her job because she co-signed something for the reception venue. My dad just kept saying the same thing over and over. That Ryan had agreed. That this wasn't theft. That I was blowing it up. Then Ryan snapped. You told me it was a gift from Michael. You said he wouldn't care. The courtyard went silent. My sister turned to my dad. Is that true? He didn't answer. Then she said, You told me it was Ryan's idea. Everything went downhill from there. They started arguing right there in front of my building. Accusing each other. Shouting over who said what. My dad blaming Ryan. My sister blaming both of them. Ryan trying to walk away while my sister grabbed his arm. I stood there and watched for a minute, then said, You can all explain this to a judge. And I went back upstairs. By the time I closed my door, I already had another voicemail from my mom. She was crying. Again. But I didn't listen to it. Because the lawsuit was just the beginning. The papers landed in their mailbox 3 days later. My lawyer called me that afternoon just to say, I hope you're ready. Because this is about to get ugly. He wasn't wrong. That evening, my dad texted me once. You'll regret doing this to your own father. No apologies. No explanations. Just that. By the end of the week, the attorney confirmed what I already suspected. The money had been moved out of the account the day after the wedding. My name was never added to the account, but we had proof that I transferred it to my parents for safekeeping, and I still had the message from my mom when she acknowledged receiving it. There was no loan contract, but there was enough paper trail to build a case around trust and misuse of funds. And the part that really hurt? My sister had signed the wedding vendor contracts herself. Her name was on everything, the florist, the DJ, the venue. It wasn't my dad or Ryan. It was her. The lawyer sent a second notice to all parties, demanding repayment from my dad and my sister. That's when things blew wide open. Suddenly, my sister flipped. She called me in tears again, this time sobbing about how Dad had lied to her too. That she never meant for this to happen. That she just wanted one nice day after all the stress of planning, and Dad said he'd take care of the money. But it was too late. We were past the point of cleanup. Then Ryan called me. Actually called. Not to defend himself this time. To throw my dad under the bus completely. He told me my dad had borrowed money from someone else months ago, a personal loan he hadn't told anyone about. That he'd used part of my money to make a payment on that loan before the wedding, and that only part of it had actually gone to the wedding itself. So not only had they spent my money, they'd lied about where it went. And my sister didn't even know. She called me again that night. Said she confronted Dad and he exploded. Told her if she didn't support him, she was turning her back on the family. She said he started blaming her for not keeping me under control. Like this was all her fault for not talking me down. That was the last time she tried to get me to drop it. And I didn't. My lawyer filed the case 2 weeks later, civil court, full repayment plus legal fees. The papers named my father directly, with my sister and Ryan as witnesses to the misuse of funds. Mom stopped calling. She just started messaging every couple of days with vague one-liners like, "This is going to tear us apart." And, "We were only trying to help her." But none of that mattered anymore. Because one by one, the rest of the family started reaching out. My uncle texted me. "Saw the wedding pics. Didn't know you weren't there. That's messed up." My cousin called and said, Everyone at the reception thought you were out of the country. That's what your dad told us. And my grandma, the only one who ever treated me like a human being, called me just to say, "You do what you have to do, sweetheart." They've embarrassed all of us. By the time the court date was set, half the family wasn't speaking to my parents. The neighbors had found out. My aunt heard about it through church. My sister stopped posting wedding pictures altogether. The ones already up? She deleted them. And the mortgage? Yeah. That came up next. I used to send them money sometimes. Quietly. Helped pay their car's insurance. Covered the electric bill twice. Nothing huge. Just enough to keep things stable. But after all this, I told them they'd never see another cent from me. That was when the panic turned into real desperation. The court date was now set in stone. June 3rd, 10 a.m. The civil suit for the unauthorized use of funds would be heard. My lawyer said it was a clean case, not simple emotionally, but straightforward legally. I didn't even feel anxious. Just focused. It was the first time in weeks I'd felt like I was back in control. That's when the real unraveling began. I stopped answering my mother's messages first. She kept sending texts like, "You're not a cruel person, I know that," and "Let's just sit down and talk before it's too late." But she never actually denied what they did. Never even admitted it either. Her texts were just emotional bait, never accountability. I blocked her. Then I blocked my sister again, after she messaged me from another new number asking if I'd at least consider putting the lawsuit on pause. She said they were trying to refinance the car loan and that they couldn't afford to make the minimum payments anymore. I didn't respond. Not even to say no. The next morning, my dad left me a voicemail. "You're really going through with this, huh? You think this is justice? You're gonna feel big suing your own father? For what? Money you weren't even using?" I didn't bother replying. I saved it and forwarded it to my lawyer. But that same afternoon, my sister called from yet another number. She sounded worn down. Different than before. I could hear people arguing in the background. She told me Ryan had moved out temporarily to stay with a friend. Said things were tense. That the fight about the money turned into something bigger. That Ryan blamed my dad for making him look like an idiot, and worse, a thief. Then she said something that made me pause. "He's talking about backing out of the marriage." I didn't answer. She kept going. Said the wedding debts were stacking up. Said my dad hadn't made his usual contribution toward the mortgage that month, and they were short by nearly $800. That she was behind on the electric bill. That they were still paying interest on the wedding chairs, the chairs, for God's sake, and her bank had already called twice. Then she said it. "You're just going to abandon us?" I didn't answer her right away. I wanted to say something measured. But instead I asked, "Did you ever stop and ask how I was paying my rent while saving for that car?" She was silent. "Do you know how many shifts I took on weekends? How many times I said no to going out with friends because I was saving every dollar I could? Did that ever cross your mind when you watched them spend it on cake and decorations and a stupid balloon wall?" She started crying again, but I didn't soften. Because it wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the complete lack of acknowledgement. Like I was some footnote in their life, someone who didn't matter unless they needed something. Then I reminded her. "There were 56 people at your wedding." 56. "You didn't even send me an invitation," she whispered. "I didn't want to hear you say no. That's because you already knew what the answer would have been." I ended the call. Later that night, my dad texted me. "If this goes to court and it ends up on my record, we lose the house. Think about what you're doing." I didn't respond. Because for years I had been thinking about what I was doing. Every time I covered a bill. Every time I said yes to lending money. Every time I helped without being asked, and they didn't even say thank you. I used to send them quiet Venmos. Paid the water bill once. Split the car insurance when my dad's hours were cut. They never asked me to, not out loud. They just made sure I knew when they were short, and I'd step in. Not anymore. I pulled out of the joint Netflix. Cut off the extra phone line I'd been paying for on my plan. I told my bank to block any future attempts at auto debits from utilities tied to my name. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. And once it started, it was like I could finally breathe again. My cousin reached out that week and said, "They're telling people you turned your back on the family." I sent him screenshots of the Facebook post and the transfer confirmation from my bank. He didn't reply after that. My grandmother called. She's 84 and doesn't even text. She said my mom was going around crying in front of neighbors, telling them I was heartless. I told her the truth, plain and simple. She said, "I don't blame you. They humiliated themselves. And us. They'll have to answer for that on their own." And then she hung up. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept through the night. Because now, I wasn't waiting for anyone to explain. I wasn't hoping they'd come around. I had finally drawn the line. Court was set for June 3rd, but the writing was already on the wall long before I stepped into the building. They tried to delay it. My dad filed for a postponement, saying he needed more time to prepare. My lawyer responded with documentation showing that they'd had nearly a month already, and that any delays would only increase costs on my end. The judge sided with us. That was the first real crack in their confidence. The night before the hearing, I got a final text from my dad. "No matter what happens tomorrow, just remember this was your choice." I didn't respond. I wore a simple button-up and jeans to court. No family came with me. No one sat behind me. My lawyer and I walked in, made our case, and let the truth do the work. We had the original bank transfer receipt. The text between me and my mom when I asked them to hold the money. The Facebook post thanking the sponsor who stayed home. A printed version of my dad's message saying Ryan agreed to it. And the voicemail where my sister admitted that dad told her not to invite me. They didn't even try to deny the money was mine. Just tried to reframe it. My dad claimed it was a misunderstanding. That I'd never said they couldn't use it. That he was under pressure to help my sister and made a choice that he thought the family would support. The judge asked him if I'd ever given written or verbal consent for the money to be used. He said no, then paused, then said, "But I didn't think it was necessary." That was it. That was all the judge needed. He ruled in my favor. They were ordered to repay the full $8,500, plus $2,100 in legal fees, plus a deadline, 30 days. No exceptions. It didn't feel like a victory. It just felt done. Like the end of a long job you never wanted to start. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my lawyer. The check had arrived. Certified mail. Signed by my father. Paid in full. I picked it up the same day, deposited it, and 2 days later, I bought a used Honda Civic that I'd had my eye on for months. Clean title, one owner, drives smooth. That night, I went for a drive just to feel the air coming through the windows. No music. No calls. Just silence. I thought that was the end of it. But then, of course, they came back one more time. It was a Sunday. Late morning. I was home doing laundry when someone buzzed the intercom. I checked the camera. It was my sister. Alone. Holding 2 coffees and a small photo album. She didn't press the buzzer more than once. Just stood there. I answered through the speaker. She asked if she could come up. Said she wanted to talk. Said she didn't want to lose me. That things had gotten out of control, and she didn't know how to fix it, but maybe we could start over. I asked her one question. "If I never filed the lawsuit, would you have apologized?" There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "Probably not." That was all I needed to hear. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. But I wasn't going to pretend nothing happened. I said, "You broke it. I just stopped pretending it could be fixed." Then I ended the call. She stood outside for a while longer, then walked off. My mom hasn't shown up again. She still sends texts every couple of months, always around holidays. Stuff like, "We miss you," or "Hope you're doing well." I never reply. I haven't spoken to my dad since the hearing. Not once. I probably never will. Ryan and my sister didn't last. He moved out officially 3 months after the wedding. My cousin said he's back living with his parents, and refusing to talk about anything related to our family. Most of the extended family took my side. Quietly, for the most part, but clearly. My grandmother still calls every Sunday. She told me last week that my parents told the neighbors I'd cut them off for petty reasons. Then she said, "They used to be proud of you. Now they're just bitter you stopped letting them use you." That one stuck with me. And the funny thing is, I don't feel bitter. I feel free. For the first time in my life, I'm not tied to people who only remember me when there's a bill to pay. I'm not trapped in silent obligations. I'm not carrying guilt that doesn't belong to me. I still live in the same apartment. I still work the same job. But everything feels different now. Because now, every dollar I earn, it's mine. Every decision I make, it's mine. And every boundary I set, it stays. That's the end of it. No revenge. No reunion. Just peace. And honestly, that's worth more than the $8,500 ever was. It's been about 6 months since the lawsuit ended. Life's been quiet, exactly how I wanted it. Last week, I got a letter in the mail from a law office I didn't recognize. I figured it was junk at first, but when I opened it, I saw it was from Ryan's attorney. Not related to me directly, more of a formality. It turns out Ryan filed a small claims case against my dad for misrepresentation and financial damages. Basically, he's trying to recover some of the money he put into the wedding. Apparently a lot of it came from loans he took out based on promises my dad made that never came through. The letter was just a notice that my name had come up in documents, and I might be asked to confirm parts of the timeline. I called the number listed, gave them a short statement, and that was that. Honestly, it didn't hit me emotionally one way or another. Just felt like a loose end tying itself up. In unrelated news, I've been slowly planning a move out of state. Nothing major, just a job opportunity came up, and it feels like the right time. New city, new people, fresh start. I haven't told anyone in the family. Not because I'm hiding, just because I don't know them updates anymore. It's strange how quickly things normalize once you take the weight off. The silence I used to find uncomfortable is now something I protect. Peaceful. Private. My own.